can stay away from each other. The
let's hug it out.
Hug it out for the feedback. All right. Okay, so hey everybody. I think we're gonna get started now. There might be more people coming in through the door, but that's fine. Just ignore anybody who comes through the door. That's fine. My name's Antonio. Thanks everybody for coming. This is a really cool turnout. Thanks for coming down and hanging out here at IDX. This is where I work. I work here at IDX Broker. I manage the channel for all our partners who consume our data and just head over here for the live. Consume our data and do other developer stuff. So, yeah, this is Bao Kim. He's going to be presenting with me today on HTML5 and JavaScript. All that fun. But before we get started, JS. Yeah, give it up for JS. Before we get started, and also when it comes to clapping, I'd like to call out Max. Max, stand up. So everybody wave at Max. So Max got this whole meetup ball rolling and has been kind enough to pass it off to me. I hope he'll make proud. I put up his Twitter handle in here if you want to tell him how great he is on Twitter and follow him. He's got a lot of funny and interesting things to say. Also online right now for this year, we threw up a website, EugeneWebDevs.com. You can go ahead and visit that. It will always show the latest meetup.
There we go.
Oh yeah, let's take a look at it. So we'll always show the latest meetup. This will change tomorrow on its own. If it doesn't, go ahead and flame me on Twitter. It's fine. There's more about what we do and ways to get involved, whether it's the monthly meetups, local hackathons, or anything else we put up here. And then, of course, thanking our sponsors, IDX, who donates this space that we're all hanging out in, and the pizza. Yeah.
IDX.
Also, Technology Association of Oregon, who puts on a lot of great events. I'll have more stuff on the website for the events as well.
I broke it.
And Val breaks things.
So. I'm sorry.
And of course, Eugene Tech. If you're not involved with Eugene Tech, I encourage you to get involved. There's Tech Tuesday to come meet up and hang out with other devs. You can join them on Slack, eugenetech.org, easy to find. So yeah, I encourage everybody here to be part of that group as well. Another great group, Women in Tech. Another great meetup. Go to meetup.com and you can find that one. I'll throw a link up on Eugene Web Devs as well. So if you want to find us anywhere else, Facebook, Twitter, GitHub, and of course Meetup. On our GitHub, we have a lot of docs about how to get involved. If you want to do a talk, if anybody here wants to do a talk, we've got space open later in the year. We've got things scheduled about till June, but we're open to doing more talks as well. So that'll check there and please contribute and hit me up if you want to know anything more about that. Okay, so that being said, let's get into today's talk. So again, thanks for everybody for coming and listening to me ramble about HTML5 and JavaScript. I'm Antonio Chega Jr. This is Bao Kim, like I said. And yeah, let's get into it.
All right. So tonight's topic is about web APIs. And okay. Tonight's topic is about web APIs. And specifically, we're talking about mobile hardware control, tools that we can use with HTML5 and JS to use parts of your phone, things like the orientation API, which lets you kind of use a gyroscope in your phone to know which way you're tilting, if you're in portrait or landscape, right, landscape mode. Things like that, alpha, beta, gamma, all different ways of doing that. You can also use a camera function with the media API. And there's a bunch of APIs we're going to go through. And so this talk, we're going to go through first why you might want to consider using the web APIs, and specifically HTML5 and JavaScript for your next web application, maybe. And then we're going to talk about what web APIs provide right now. Then we'll get into some examples. Following that, we'll get into why nots of some restrictions and gotchas for why you might not want to use it. And then we'll end with some security and vulnerability issues with using these APIs. And I think that's it. Yeah, let's get started. All right.
So the real question I think we're all trying to answer here is, can HTML5 and JavaScript save us from getting into Xcode and Android Studio? Yeah. 2 new IDEs to learn, 2 new ways of doing things. One's Objective-C and Swift, the other is Java, front-end web devs. That may not be our cup of tea. So to be able to avoid this would be a really powerful thing. It would be really cool to just play in the languages we know. So that's the question, but why not? Like, what's the advantage of not doing that? First one, like I mentioned, the IDEs. Many of you may have an IDE you like or text editor you like. Why have to jump into a new one and learn where all the settings are and where all the permissions are and keep that up to date? All those things. Also, no compiled languages. We can just play in the web languages that we're all used to, HTML and JavaScript. So why compile down to Swift or Java? No need for the complexity of the different code bases. Even if your applications are really, really similar, they're still going to be different at the end of the day. That's because these are really two different platforms that are trying to accomplish very similar things on your mobile device, but they're just simply not the same. This also carries over to the operating system itself. iOS is different than Android, and when we're talking about a web application, it can even get extended down to the operating system when things are different. And then we're all dealing with browser compatibility as it is every single day. Why add more layers of complexity onto that, down to the OS level even? No pressure to force obsolescence. So when you create applications in Xcode or Android, they really want you developing always for the latest version of their system. Sometimes they will even kick you out of the store if your application's too old. This doesn't really happen on the web so much. I'm sure plenty of you have seen on somebody's website and it's some GeoCities thing that's never been updated and it's 25 years old, but it still works. And all it really does is give text, so there's nothing really that bad. We have our own upgrades to worry about. Sanitizing inputs, worrying about new attacks on the web. Why bring this extra layer of complexity in again? No limit or bottleneck with distribution. And what I mean by that, you're always going to be limited with native applications to the stores, because that's where they live. The Android App Store, the iOS App Store. That's your distribution. And if you target one because it's more popular, then your distribution is going to be cut in half until you come up to the Android version, usually. We even see this with brand new apps. The new Nintendo one with Mario comes out for iOS first, so half the potential user base isn't getting their app for, I don't even think, still. Yeah, and no need to compete with other apps. I don't know the average amount. Average is 0? Chris says the average is 0. Anybody watching the stream, get online and verify that, and tell Chris Showbloom that's 0 per month. Okay, I believe that address. It's very low, but everybody visits web pages in their browser. Oh, it's now. So Facebook isn't live? Okay, now it's live. Okay, cool. Everybody on Facebook, everybody on YouTube, you've probably already been watching. We said a bunch of stuff, and it was really great. The slides, everything will be on GitHub. Everything's being recorded. So, I'm Antonio. This is Val. We're at IDX Broker, and it's also on YouTube, recorded in its entirety. Yeah.
So now that we've kind of gone over why you might want to consider using HTML5 and JavaScript for your next web app, the next question is, well, what can it do for me? And this is only a very small partial list of potential APIs that are possible for you to use just with HTML5 and JavaScript, mostly JavaScript.
You need the tag for some of them.
Right.
Yeah.
Oh, that's true. You need the tag for some of them. But I'll just go over some of these on the list, and they're quite powerful and pretty awesome. They might spark some ideas for some things you guys might want to try. Media Capture API, that's for capturing with your camera on your phone or with the mic. So audio, video, and images all can be captured using that API. That's, I think, very cool. Geolocation, that's been around for quite a while, pretty well supported. You can capture the location of wherever the phone is. File API, that's for local storage stuff on the phone. You can read, write, all of the basic stuff you can do with files using that API. orientation, that's the one I was talking about before with the gyroscope, that lets you track the alpha, beta, and gamma of your phone. Tilting, those are the right things, right? Okay. Yeah. Smart caching. This is really cool. It's not just offline and online caching, but with service workers, what you can actually do is, depending on how fast your connection is, or depending on which elements you think are more important to cache or use from cache first, you can dynamically do that with whatever choices you want. So if somebody's on a slow connection, instead of having to, it is an open connection, so generally with dumb caching or normal caching, you would have to wait there for hours, minutes, just to let the page load. But if you do smart caching, it might let you kind of start loading all the pieces that you might have saved previously, which is quite handy. Pretty good stuff. Vibration, I think everybody knows what vibration is. What you use it for, I don't know. Games, notifications, games. Full screen API. This is, I think, it's a pretty simple one, but a pretty important one if you want your web API to have that kind of native application feel, instead of having that kind of browser border around your app. Jesus. Having that browser border around your app, you can actually use a full screen API to have of course, a full screen experience. The battery API lets you kind of determine how much battery life is on your phone. WebSockets is not necessarily a hardware one, but I feel like it's one of the more important APIs out there right now. It's very important if you're going to be making any applications for P2P reasons, from games to chat to anything where you might want to have instantaneous back-to-back interactions with user and user. And ambient light sensors, that's pretty self-explanatory. If it's in your pocket or on your face or just out, you can use the API to know how much light your phone is getting. Multimedia, that's a pretty classic HTML5 one. It lets you use the canvas tag to play videos, play audio,
and help get rid of Flash.
Sure, and help get rid of Flash, make games using Canvas. And then the home screen icon is kind of the cherry on top, where I think it was Apple originally did this, right?
Yeah, most of the tags are still Apple-centric.
Right. It's an Apple-centric tag, but if you include it into your web application, when people save your application or bookmark onto your home mobile desktop screen, you can insert your own desktop icon or whatever you want for your web app. So with the full screen and the home screen icon and whatever APIs you want to use, you can get a pretty awesome kind of web application going. And I forgot to mention, all of this and more can be found at mobilehtml5.org. They have a huge list, an amazing table that shows what works on what devices, what browsers, and that transitions into our next point.
So there's plenty of cool stuff to obviously play with and make new applications, but there are still plenty of gotchas out there. Most of these APIs are supported by Chrome. A lot of them are, and Chrome is really leading the way as far as its support. But that doesn't mean you're going to be developing for Chrome. And if you are developing Chrome, it means it's not quite the same as on Android as iOS, because those two Chromes really are the same. So there's still plenty of that gotcha there. But that's something we're all used to. We're all used to browser compatibility issues. So that's a gotcha, but not a huge one. One of the ones is HTTPS is required for a lot of these, especially anything that's getting deeper into the phone hardware. HTTPS is required for even just geolocation, which is pretty common, and Google asks you a lot for that. It's not required by, and I'm not sure who determines this, but something else like the battery life, which is funny. Because somebody out there is saying, oh, this is safe and this isn't. Whether or not they're right is a different story. We'll get to that later. And not all browsers are going to have full support for these. They may support part of it and say, yes, it's supported, but that doesn't mean your device hardware is going to be read correctly. Chrome does support, my favorite example is the ambient light sensor. I'm pretty sure it's not going to work on any of your devices. It will say it's supported, but it just doesn't seem to work. And if anybody does find that works, let me know, because I'd be really surprised. So let's take a look at some of this stuff in action. We just made a simple web application that highlights some of these APIs. If you want to visit it right now, I'll give everybody a chance. You can pull out your phones. Sorry, no Wi-Fi, but data plan's fine. This is pretty small. Just go ahead and visit it. Sorry? Oh, I was wrong. Wi-Fi password's over there. So it's complicated. Yeah, this whole thing's a big phishing scam. So anybody watching the stream on Facebook or YouTube, you can go to the same link. Probably on Facebook, it's a little harder to read. On YouTube, you probably can read it just fine. But you can go there, and everybody kind of just give everybody another second or two if you're going to go. The password's on there. It is. What is it? It's on the smallest screen we could put it on. Yeah. That's for us. So this is going. Hands off. All right. Looks like some people are connected. Yeah. Error messages. Oh yeah, it's case sensitive. Just so everybody knows, it is case sensitive. Yep. All right, so next time we're going to make a much simpler URL, even if it is shortened. All right. That's cool. And if it lands on the GitHub, you can scroll down on the README, and it should be a link there to it, the same thing. It'll also be up there. Yeah. No, it's not that important. Yeah. So this fits in with the gotchas I just said. Anyways, so this is the page. Again, this will all be on GitHub. You can scroll along and follow along, or don't worry about it. So everything's written here in just HTML, just HTML5 and JavaScript. There's no libraries, nothing else, and very little CSS. Just keep it short. And there's also resources on these pages for a lot of the tutorials that were used to make this. So first one, now I can open this. So battery data. So click this. I don't know what's going on. Now I know my battery status, at least some of it right here. So yes. Mobile's not really showing the code very well, but it will be on GitHub. But it's really a couple simple functions you call, and you have status on this battery. I'm not sure what the practical application for this, other than maybe if you know the battery's low, you don't load some things for your application. That would probably be the main one. As far as like practical use cases, that's probably it. I can't think of another one. So, now you want to go to the next one? I'll get to that. So now we see Val. Everybody here can see Val. If you're following along, you might be able to see your own face. I recommend that instead of Val. And so we're writing that to the canvas. We're streaming that to the canvas tag. Val, can you go back up to your face? So yeah, this is just streaming to the canvas tag. You can capture this. You can do something else with it. You can make faces at it all day. Even with just this alone, you can see where we're starting to be able to emulate a lot of the functions that native applications do. For example, Instagram. You can stream this, capture it, apply a JavaScript filter, and then send it off to Instagram, and you've really, and along with geolocation, you've pretty much replicated a native application. There's also for this, you could, instead of streaming to it, upload a file, video, something else. And even this, the JavaScript for this is a little bit larger because we're streaming to it, but in its simplest form, we're talking just not very many lines of JavaScript that you need to add. Geolocation, this is definitely one of the ones that requires HTTPS, and all it does is give you a Latin long. and apparently breaks my Google map that I put in there for whatever reason. So it's also very short. Ambient light, this is not supported by a bunch of things. I just throw it in here as one of the ones that's probably not going to be supported for a very long time. Really surprised if it's going to be supported on anybody's device here. You can try it, but it's probably not going to happen. So this is regex, and we put in the regex because we thought it was really cool to be able to do a regex layer on your inputs instead of relying on the server side to sanitize all your inputs. So now we have an extra layer on the client side that can reject crazy stuff people are trying to put in the inputs. This protects you against, injection stuff and also against bad data. So you can start you can start your validation process on the client side before you even hit your servers and waste your resources on somebody who doesn't know how to type in an email address. Local storage is not really one that's, it's just storage. Honestly, it didn't really translate to this one. So here we have the orientation. So this is all moving as if I was moving my phone. This is capturing it and recording and reporting how the phone is oriented. So now I can know exactly where it is, not just landscape or portrait, but also in 3 dimensions. And they call it alpha gamma. Yeah, we're only reporting the 2 of them just for brevity. Yeah. In the 3D world, we do have all those dimensions. I'm not sure we're outputting it, though. Yep. It's just missing on the output, yeah. But it is recording all of those, and it's a 2-dimensional representation, so that's why we had it as 2 dimensions. And of course, like Val said, vibration is whatever you guys feel like doing with it. It's supported. That's because, and that's one of the gotchas is like, yeah, it's all on Chrome and it's supported officially by Chrome, but now we're getting down to these aren't really the same. Chrome, Android, iOS, they're different. But those 2 Chromes on Android and iOS aren't really the same. Yeah. Right. Yeah, sure. How many people got most of the stuff to work, or some of it? Anybody? Okay, yeah. How many really got nothing to work? One thing. So that's actually kind of half and half. Yeah. You got nothing? And you have an Android device, right? Yeah, and that's...
So I noticed that the code actually is here for pretty much all of the partners are under the project. Is that true of all the guys within the JavaScript that are under the project, or some of them separated out into separate objects?
A lot of them are separated out, and it's a separation of concerns. So, like, a lot of it is in the DOM because this is really quick, but something else like service worker isn't. The service worker is not operating in the DOM; it's operating in the back end. So, yeah, it depends on what it's trying to do. Cool. Yeah, next slide. So that was it. In semi-action, 50% action, it sounds like. And then,
Okay. So,
oh, you're on mute.
So that brings us to the question of, should I use JavaScript in HTML5? And the little cursory survey we took is kind of one of the concerns. And so let's go to the next part. It depends on your team and project. And one of the concerns is, how widely do you want to distribute your web app? Does it need to work for everybody, or how many APIs you're using? Because depending on which tools you're using, as we've stated many times now, depending on the platform and depending on the browser, some of these are not fully supported right now. So that's one of the main concerns that you might want to think about. But on the other hand, there are the other questions of, do you have developers who can develop in Swift or Java, or sometimes both if you want to release for both platforms? And of course, added on to that is, do you have the time to spare to develop and maintain for potentially 3 or 5 different platforms? Because these days, it's not just developing for mobile only. oftentimes a lot of the current web applications like Slack, right, are ubiquitous. They're on Windows, they're on OS X, they're on iOS, they're on Android, and you have to kind of have something that works everywhere. And so, depending on the things to consider, it really makes sense to maybe try out a web app first, test your application in a smaller environment, and then maybe proceed into more platforms if need be, or if you need the tools. And that kind of brings us to the third alternative of what you can do if you do still want to provide for many platforms, but kind of still consolidate on your development resources.
Sure. So we have plenty of other things that wrap and be that API layer between JavaScript, or in the case of React, it's ESX, and and the hardware. Electron's another great one for desktop. These are all different platforms for kind of doing this idea, continuing this idea of a single code base that's distributed across a lot of different other places. That's not really true, especially with React. It does make it a lot easier, and you're closer to what you're used to, whether it's with JavaScript and HTML, but you're still having to inherit a lot of other problems as well. The stores, for example, like I had mentioned. You're still submitting to the App Store. You're still a slave to their rules. You're still a slave to whatever they decide to do, especially the Apple one, which kind of decides to do whatever it wants anytime. So also across this, we have to remember what comes with great power. I'm sure everybody's heard this quote. If you haven't read comic books, hope you have. If you haven't, talk to me about Spider-Man later. Great power comes great responsibility. Yeah, we can open up all these APIs. We can gain access to all this hardware. We can push our web applications to whole new places they never were before. You also are going to bring security risks with that, just kind of inherently. This is trying to bring this down a little bit with HTTPS, but that doesn't mean it's really going to stop a lot of these things, because people are inventive. Put up something new, they're going to find a way. So what kind of Pandora's box are we now opening with this? So there's battery exploits, which you might not think of. Of course, the ever-present, everyone's afraid of camera access. I don't know why anybody wants to watch your inside of your pocket, but people are afraid of that. Local file access and malicious service workers. So the battery one is interesting. The exploit is, or the potential exploit is, profiling a battery. Batteries aren't super unique, but their charge times, their discharge times, their capacities can give you kind of a hint at what it is. If I know what battery you have in your phone, I can try to find exploits for that particular phone. Also, if I know what kind of phone you have, I'm pretty sure I may be able to start a phishing attack against you and gain a little bit of credibility, because I'm like, your Google Pebble has a security flaw. Please enter your PayPal credentials here. Camera access is, they always ask for permission before camera access right now, but that doesn't mean you can't trick somebody into giving you permission. That's one of the big fears there, is not necessarily the hardware, but the person. And once your web application has been found to accidentally give camera access to somebody, you're going to lose all credibility amongst your users. Local file access. This is interesting because everything that has local file access has this potential problem, but our phones are a little bit different in that we're storing more and more things on our phones now. On my phone, I have how I pay for things, and I even have my fingerprint. Not to mention all the other things I have, pictures and other sensitive information that I may not want shared. So great responsibility there too. And malicious service workers. So a service worker running in the background, the user doesn't even know what it does. There's potential to start any one of these other exploits, or even just hijack their resources. I'm sure. Never mind for Bitcoins, yeah. Do attacks with it. I'll remember the recent DDoS attack from the Internet of Things, all these little things. So why not a service worker joining in on your attack, and now everybody's phone is part of their weapon. All right, so that's most of what we're talking about. This is pretty high level. Anybody have any questions? Yeah. Yeah. Phone gap's one of those layers between what you're doing and the actual hardware code. So like React Native or Angular provides, they will be that layer for you. Oh, it changed name. Oh, I see. Okay. But it's the same technology, just rebranded. Right. Okay. And for stuff like that, I think the real advantage is not necessarily the ease of the code. It's they did the store thing for you, because that's a pain, or at least it was, especially in the past with Apple. They would reject things just because they didn't like your logo. They still do, yeah. Sorry. Oh, I see. So for services like that, do they take it a step further? Like I mentioned Electron earlier. With Electron, I actually tested this out. You want to bring up my crappy Pong example? Yeah, so I recreated Pong in just JavaScript and whatnot, and just kind of as a test. So what it does is moves the paddle based on orientation, which is simple enough. If you do it on a desktop and in your web browser, it's going to, oh, not there. Did I get a bunch of messages? Now everyone streaming also knows my phone password, so feel free to do everything. So move it up and down, yeah. So if this is on a desktop, it won't respond to orientation. It will respond to a mouse.
It's really hard.
So one of the things I was trying to test with this is I'll just get one. Oh, now you're just giving up. All right. So the reason I wanted to check that one out especially is because of Electron. So this application will work on a mobile browser. This application will work on a normal desktop browser. If I take the exact same code, copy and paste it into Electron, now I have a native app that I can submit to the OS X store, the Windows store, and according to Windows, even push this to Xbox. They have a whole initiative with Electron apps. So this one code base, as terribly played as it was, it's the game's fault. My one document of HTML and JavaScript, and that's it, can really live across all these different platforms. And I mean, that's what we all want to do with all these things. But the really simple stuff, you can't have that dream.
Right. I mean, that's why React Native pretty much set 5, 6.
But even with React Native, your code base has to change slightly.
Well, no, actually, they were definitely the FBA.
Yeah, and there are you can use React Native to do hybrid apps, which is easier to do some of it native and just bring in a view. Yeah, just bring in a web view and just do kind of hybrid. Right. Yeah, and then the reason I wanted to do the simple one was to kind of not use React Native and to just one literal copy and paste with nothing else. And that was what that example was about. Any other questions, Josh?
Yeah, so one of the things you mentioned was that you do get impact, and at least for many security pop-ups. So, for instance, if I'm a mobile user and I actually go to one of these applications that it's asking to use,
Like geolocation or something, yeah.
12x different APIs, is it gonna harass me with a barrage of all these things?
Mhm.
that it kind of breaks a little bit because then you suddenly start to feel like a web page again, where you're having to say, okay, yes, allow it, yes, allow it, yes, allow it.
Yes.
And as a user, do you feel like I'm going to get frightened away
Possibly.
with these things?
Possibly, but that same risk exists with native applications.
Sure.
I've had a couple native applications that are just. What are you from? Derek?
There is a mission there is a you literally have to click it like 8 or 12 times. So what they're doing is making their apps okay. So that everybody's just okay.
Just make annoying normal, and everybody will be fine with it.
One step forward, 2 steps back.
Anybody else have any further questions? Yeah. We've been waiting a long time for even just to get this far. Honestly, when this stuff all first came out, everybody's like, "Yay! Next year we can just abandon a bunch of stuff." No, that didn't happen. And this stuff is moving forward. Google's really trying to push it, and when Google pushes really hard, everybody else follows. Again, what'd you say, Derek? Like 6 months for Safari behind. They all have their own pace, but it seems like they're fine just letting another browser go first. I'm not going to talk about Edge. Yeah. One thing that also made help accelerate it is the rise of HTML5 games. The more of those that come out and are actually played across these platforms and are cost effective to create but actually can make money will drive the demand. There definitely is. Absolutely. And that's why most of the games are super simple, like Pong.
Well, the thing is, there are already examples of successes online, like Slither.io. It's a simple game, but almost everything I know of has been a simple thing.
And some of that garbage collection.
I was going to ask, actually, are the IO games written built in this?
Many are, and many are still written and kind of ported over to native applications, mostly for distribution, as far as I can tell. As far as the garbage collection, Service Worker can handle a lot of that, but then you have to do that yourself. Yes, there still is issues with that. Nope, you have to get creative. Yep. But that's what keeps it, yeah, and that's what keeps all the games very simple. Like Slither, you just go around, or Pong, you just go up and down, or whatever. Because it's a different audience. Civ 6 is a very involved game. With Slither, you're playing it because you have 5 minutes to kill. You're not going to fire up Civ 6 to play for 5 minutes. So it's a different kind of gamer. Okay.
Are there minimum versions of the OS?
It's backwards compatible to the browser, which then is slave to the.
So it is, so it's not.
Yeah, it's by the browser. Yep. Absolutely. That's next month. It's called Elm. So that's actually the next meetup, which comes right after this. Elm is a framework for wrapping. Sorry? No. It's the last Thursday. This will be Nathan. Last Thursday of next month. Then this will be Elm, the framework that is about doing these mobile applications. Sure. And so RCP, everybody, come hang out again here. It's going to be here again. Okay. Sure. I think phishing is always going to be a concern, and I think it'll be more so in native than it has been, especially since you have a native app and you have a link. Anytime you have a link, I can find the link and try to spoof it or do something similar, whether it's in the native app or browser or not. But phishing probably will always be a bigger problem for web browser than native. I think so, just because it's easier. Yeah, it does. Yeah. You're just dying to use that vibration API. Okay. Sure. But phishing is still a potential because I can always email you with this link that looks like it's legit, and that'll always be true for anything of links. It is more difficult, but I still think you can send anybody a link anyway from anywhere. So, but you'd have to do some research and particularly target that application and its users. So, yeah, Chris. Future features beyond what they have now. Yeah, there's so many. I'm not even sure what you would even add at this point until most of them get supported fully. Yeah, I'm not exactly sure. I think the last big one that got supported, one of the big ones, like I had mentioned, the cherry on top, is allowing to download that image and keep it on your mobile home page, because then you're starting to emulate the app experience, the native app experience, a lot closer than you were before that was available. I'm not sure what else is going to do that. Maybe more access to, and more secure access. But the next one would probably be contacts, because that's a big one that's missing. But that's also a big security risk. Right, it's a big security risk, but people are going to want it. Exactly. Now I can hijack your resources and I can start spamming people from your SMS, yeah. Well, that's because I can regulate that through the store. I can't kick you off the internet, but I can kick you out of my store. And oh, yeah. Yeah. A manifest, yes. And it's a good thing. Manifests are great because you're declaring what you're actually doing, and now Chrome can try to protect the user. Service Worker has something very similar where you have to kind of declare, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that, I'm going to do everything else with your resources. So as far as downloading to the desktop, it kind of is an application, not necessarily just a document. And I think that's why it's treated as such. Josh?
You mentioned that several of the APIs are HTTPS.
Yes.
How do these things jive with base content? In other words, like, am I going to get weird notifications of base content? Is it just not going to load? Does it block it?
So right now it won't be available. It'll just be not loading. And if Google has their way, they're probably going to send you a bunch of stuff and call you and tell you that the world's crashing.
Yeah, exactly.
So it depends on the browser, really is what it comes down to. In general, it just won't load or just won't work. So you try to register a service worker over a non-secure content, it just will not work. Sure. Yeah. And they really are. They're intercepting all your network activity. So on the same page. For now. With HTTP on it. Again, for now. That's probably going to change. And that's the eventual goal. It's pretty obvious between not just Google, but I mean these guys. The HTML5 standard is the obvious goal is everything is HTTPS. So as much as that is true, don't get used to it. Yeah. haven't checked out Let's Encrypt, please do. It's cool to go buy your SSL certs places. That's all fine and good, and I'm sure Google wants you to go buy them from them. But Let's Encrypt is free and pretty neat. No. Yeah. And it's really intuitive, I think. Yeah. Okay. All right, everybody. Well, I think that's it for right now. If you have any more questions, Val was nice enough to put this slide up that says "Ask Me." So feel free to. I'll be hanging out. Thank you, everybody, for coming. Thanks for listening to me ramble. Thank you, YouTube.